Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to continue with our Flat Asteroids video game. A little bit of information first of all. If you want all of the source code, you can find that here. I've kind of changed things up on GitHub a little bit. I've created a repository for the whole Flat Asteroids project, so it's going to have not only the Flat engine code right here, but we also have the Flat Asteroids actual game code as well. So I'm going to keep that updated. Every time we work on a new part of the game, I'm going to upload all the source code here so that it's all freely available for download. And feel free to use the Flat library for whatever you want, but you can find all of that here in the Flat Asteroids. Let's go back to our game code here. Let's go ahead and run this and we'll just see where we left off. Alright, there we are. So we have the asteroid entities are ready to go. We have the physics being applied for the craft. Today I want to do a couple things. I want to start adding sound effects, and I also want to add a rocket vector effect for the back of the ship. First of all, let's go ahead and add the rocket sound effect. And before we do that, let me show you the tools that I've been using. The first one is a program called SFXR, which is freely available on the internet. And let me go ahead and show you the website. Here's the website for this project. Really neat software that allows you to create retro sound effects. Also, I'm going to add a link to every one of these sites that we're visiting. For example, the GitHub repository and this SFXR, really neat application. So here's the application. On the left side here, they have the generator. And every time you pick one of these buttons, it's going to randomly generate a sound that should sound something like what the description says. So that's what I've been using for the sound effect, as well as also this tool that's called Audacity, which is a free audio editor. Audacity is freely available for download here. Links for all of these down in the description. Back in our code, let's go ahead and talk about loading sound effects. The first thing I need to do is actually bring in the namespace for MonoGame audio, and that will look like this. Next, we need to create a way to reference the sound effect. This sound effect is actually going to be the rocket sound or the rocket thruster sound when you apply the acceleration force. So I'm going to call this is going to be a sound effect, and I'm going to call this rocket sound. But before we can actually load the sound, we need to include the sound effect into our content file. So over here we have the content MGCB file. We're going to go ahead and open that. In here I'm going to add a new sound effect. So I'm just going to click on the content and then tell it that I want to add an existing item. Then you just need to navigate to the location where the audio file is located. The one I'm going to use is this one called EXPL02. So I'm going to click that and click open. I want to add a link to the file, and we'll click add. And so now that it's here, I actually need to build the content file. It says build succeeded, so we're good there. Now it's available for me to actually use inside of my application. Back here inside of the game class, we have this load content function. We want to tell the content manager that we want to load an asset out of that file, out of the content file. It's going to be a sound effect, so we need to tell it that's the type we're loading. And then the asset name, let's go ahead and open up the content manager again. The asset file name is actually this without the file extension. So we're just going to now pass in the name of that asset without the extension, so it's EXPL02. Now that we've told the content to load the sound effect, we need to now set the rocket sound reference to what we've loaded with the content manager. Let's go ahead and test to see if it actually works. If we've clicked a key, we'll just use the Q key since we're not using that one yet. I want to tell the rocket sound effect that we want to play. We have some parameters here we can fill up. For the volume, 0 is silence, like it says down here, and 1 is full. So I'm just going to pick a relatively quiet. We'll do 0.3. Pitch will just be 0, and pan will be 0. So let's go ahead and run that, and we'll just see if it works like expected. Okay, so it loaded. That's a good sign. And hopefully you can hear that. But when I press the Q key, I'm hearing the sound effect playing. That sounds good. We know it works. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. For basically playing a sound, that's all you need, but we want to have more control over how we play the sound effect. In order to do that, we need to bring in a sound effect instance. I'm going to call that the rocket sound instance. And having an instance will just give us more control over whether we are playing or stopping the sound, pausing the sound. It gives us more options for what we want to do with the sound effect that we have. So now down here in the load content, we're also going to have another line, and we're going to get a rocket sound instance, and we just take the rocket sound that we loaded and we create an instance. Okay, so now that we have that, we'll have more control over the sound effect. And I want to play the sound effect whenever the rocket acceleration is happening. So down here we have the up key. This is where we're applying the force for the rocket. And actually I'm going to change this, the name of this function just a little bit here. So back in the main ship class, I'm going to call this the rocket force. Just make it more specific to what we're actually doing there. Back in our game class, if we are applying rocket force, I want to play the sound. So we bring up the rocket sound instance and we tell it first of all what the volume is going to be. I'm going to change this to 0.2. 0 is silence and 1 is full volume. I want it to play the sound. So now it's going to play the sound every time I'm holding down the key. But really I only want to play if it's not playing already. So let's check the instance of the rocket sound. We're going to check the state, and if it does not equal playing, then I want to play the sound. And let's just see how that works. Okay, and that works really well actually. The only problem is when I let off the key, I want it to stop playing, and it actually continues playing until the end of the sound. When I stop pressing the up arrow key, I want it to actually then stop playing the rocket sound. So let's make an else statement down here. We're going to check the state of the instance of the rocket sound. If the sound state is playing, then I want to stop playing the sound effect. So bring in the instance again and tell it we want to stop. Okay, it should stop immediately the moment I let off the up arrow key. Perfect. Okay, and that looks really good. The moment I let off the key, it just stops playing the sound. Okay, perfect. So now we have basic sound effects. I want to make a graphic now that'll show that we are applying rocket acceleration. Back in our main ship, I'm going to add a Boolean, because the moment I start applying this rocket force, I want to show a graphic on the screen coming out the back of the ship showing, hey, we're applying a rocket thruster force. I'm going to have a variable that says, and this is going to be a Boolean value, and it's simply going to determine if the rocket is currently running. So I'm going to call it isRocket or isRocketForce. We'll call it isRocketForce. We're going to set that to false to start by default. Then we're going to actually override the draw command. And if the rocket force, then I want to actually draw a rocket vector. Let's go ahead. We need to actually now make a polygon that's going to represent that. And that polygon is just going to be a triangle. So let's make some vertices here. I'm going to call this the rocket vertices. And let's go ahead and define those. It's going to need 3 vertices since it'll be a triangle. And I'm going to go back to our drawing program here just to kind of get an idea of what we want to draw. It's going to look like this in general. It's going to start here at this one and come out here in this direction and then over here like this. Okay, and we'll have a vertex here as well. We're going to need 3 vertices. These 2 vertices are already defined in our rocket ship. So we can just grab vertices 2 or vertices 3 and 2, and we're going to come around in clockwise winding order. We'll just start at 3, and then we'll go to 2, and then we'll make a new one out over here. Let's go ahead and define that first using these 2. We want index number 3 and index number 2 in that order. The first one is going to be the vertices 3, then the second vertex in the rocket vertices is going to be vertices number 2, and then the third vertex in the rocket vertices, let's just make it what I want to do is actually come out this direction a certain amount. Let's just pick a random amount. So this whole thing from here to here is 16. Let's say we want to come out 20 from the x. So that'll be a negative 20 on the x. And the y will just be 0. We'll just keep it on this 0. So negative 20 on the x and then 0. So if the rocket force is being applied, we want to use the shape batcher to draw a polygon. We have the rocket vertices, the transform, we're going to have to work on that. Thickness is just going to be 1, and the color will be yellow. And I don't think we have, oh yeah, we have the MonoGame framework reference there, so we do have that available. So now we need to make the transform again, and I'm just going to go back to the entity parent class here because we already defined the transform. Let's just copy this and define the transform in here again. And that's probably somewhere where we can do some optimization since we're actually calculating transform here. And then again, back over in this struct, we're calculating transform again. Maybe we can find a way of just calculating it one time instead of doing it twice like that. Looks like we're missing the namespace for the flat library. So that'll just bring that there. All right, and that should be everything to bring that up. And let's find out. Oh, I need to actually pass in that transform now. There we go. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, okay. So it's not actually displaying it because we never set is rocket force to true. And we need to do that down here inside the apply rocket force. So let's set that to true. We also have to have a way to turn off that rocket force or to tell it that we're not applying the rocket force anymore. So let's just make one more function, disable rocket force. And all it's going to do is say that the rocket force is false. I need to call this function somewhere, and so inside the game class, if the keyboard key is not down, let's just tell it that we need to now tell the player to disable the rocket force. That should be everything to get the rocket force vector display up. Alright, there we go. That looks pretty good. Now to finish this up, I want to make this point a little bit random, so it looks like it's more like a flame projecting out the back of the ship itself. And so we're going to pick some random points around here that will change as the force is applied. Inside the main ship, I need to have some timer code. We need to determine what the total amount of time that we're going to display the rocket vector before we switch to another point. Okay, so how long do we want to display here before we pick another point, maybe here or here or here? So the amount of time is going to be in milliseconds. We're going to call this rocket. I'm going to call this random rocket time. It's going to record the random rocket start time. And so this is the amount of time that we're going to stay at that point, and this is the actual time that we started at that point. So then once our amount of time has elapsed, then we'll move on and pick another random point. So now we need to override the update function so we can do some rocket specific things for the main ship class. So let's override the update. Here we have the game timer. I want to go ahead and record what the current time is in milliseconds. I'm going to make a variable called now, and let's just get the current time from the game timer. And that's the total game time, and we want that in milliseconds. And now we're just going to find out how much time has elapsed since the last time we updated the rocket vertex. And so we subtract the current time from the rocket start time. And if that's greater than or equal to the total of time, which is the random rocket time, then we want to actually change where the vertex is. And now that I look at we also need to define what their initial values are here. So the random rocket time, I'm going to make that 60 milliseconds. And then the random start time, when we start, it's just going to be at 0. And then we'll update that as we go along. Okay, so if we've determined that the time has elapsed, then we need to record the current time. So the random start time will just be whatever time it is now. And then let's pick some random values for our rocket vertex. So I'm just going to make some minimum and maximum values for the x and the y coordinate on that vertex. So I'm going to say the rocket min x is going to be something, and the rocket max x is going to be another value. Up here we put it at -20 and 0. So the variance along the x, let's make the variance relatively high, so something like maybe 4 in each direction. So we started at -20, so I want the variance to be between -24 and then -16. Okay, so it could be anywhere, the x could be anywhere in between those two positions, Let's do the same thing for the y. So the min y will be a value, and the max y will be another value. We are at 0, and I want to be able to go up and down within a certain variance, and I think I'm going to make that 2. The minimum is going to be a -2, and the maximum is going to be a +2. Alright, so now that we have that, let's set the rocket vertex for the third index is going to be a new vector 2, and we want to pick a random x and a y. So we're going to use our random helper again, but this time I want to pick a random single, but I don't want to provide this random object. I want the random object to be created and working just to give me just completely random numbers. So inside the class, I'm going to make a static random number generator, and I'm going to call this static random, and that'll be, we got to initialize that here, and I'm not going to provide any kind of random seed value. And so now let's just copy this function, and instead of providing a random number generator, we're going to use the one that is provided in our static class, and we'll just use static rand there. Back in our main ship class, let's generate the vertices using that random number generator. So the random helper, we want to get random single, and that'll be the min x and the max x. And on the y, we're going to do the same thing for the random helper. We want to get a random single, and that'll be between the min y and the max y. Okay, so now as long as we're applying a rocket force, this should be more of a random value. So let's just see if how that looks. There we go. And actually that looks pretty good. I think I like it. I may want to make that a little bit longer. Let's see. So we were starting at -20. What if I start at a -24? And on the x, I'm going to make this a -28 for the minimum and a -20 for the maximum. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, so that's it for this one. I just wanted to get that graphic on there and talk about how sound effects work and add just a basic sound effect for our ship.